Tonight is Ralph Reed's Raw, and I introduce Donald Goines yet again, ladies and gentlemen. Street Players. This was voted in. So let's not waste any more time. Shout out to Maria da Silva, J Knox, SGCEO, Cynthia, Chadwick Rucker, Alasia Ross, Estanislava Cardona, Monster, Lost Roads, Keith Woods, Seas All the Time, K-Town, Trey Noel, Jamie Pearson, Just Being Kiki, Tawidi, Sherelle 5150, Danielle Cunningham, Tequila Green, CJ, Mr. Light, J Bobo, Goosejack, Deswarn Manuel, The Fort, Lady Rain 808, Pretty Ricky 22, Desmond Thomas, Darielle Carrington, I've Been a Healer, Marcus Valentine, Kyla Isla, and the Mighty Isla Family, BLE 007, Michael Woodford, Papmaster OST, Anthony Leach, Calm, Nana James, Tama, Mr. Fulltime, Brian Latham, Mr. T, Jalogic and Friends, which are the Ranters Union, and finally, Demon Wolf 570. All right, folks, tune in today, because you know I always got something to say. Welcome once again to Ralph Reed's Raw. In this, his fourth novel, Goines tests the tensile strength of a ghetto spawn who clawed his way to the top and fights like hell to stay there. He's known as Earl the Black Pearl, and he's left the homeboys behind, way behind. He's cool, sharp as an ice crystal, and it seems that no one can touch him until someone, even higher up, puts the heat on, and his friends began dropping like flies of lead poisoning. That's when Earl fights back and all hell breaks loose. As the older officer walked around the squad car to get in on the driver's side, the young one turned to Earl, who was sitting in the back seat. "You low-life bastard," he said. "You—" He didn't get a chance to complete the statement. Earl hit him between the eyes, and before the young officer could retaliate, he hit him again. He was a black streak, throwing punches from the shoulder. The officer managed to open the door, but as he staggered out, Earl jumped from the back seat and buffeted him with a barrage of punches until the officer slumped to the curb. A warning was sounded from the crowd, but before Earl could spin around, the older officer hit him from behind with his blackjack, and Earl slipped quietly to the sidewalk. Donald Goines, Street Players, or Street Players by Donald Goines. Chapter 1. Earl's apartment was elaborately, tastefully, and expensively furnished. The three young men lounging on the floor had completely disregarded the plush, gold, velvet couch and matching chairs to stretch out on a deep pile red wall-to-wall carpet. Charles, a tall Negro with brown, bumpy skin and the high natural began crawling towards the coffee table while Earl and the others watched listlessly. Anybody want me to roll them a joint? He asked. You can twist me another, as long as you're at it. As long as you're at it, man. Billy, a slim, dark-complexioned black man, called from the far corner. Billy pushed a cushion from beneath his head and rose to a sitting position, patting his hair lightly, pushing the process back in place. He eyed Earl, who was standing across the room, looking out of the picture window. All right, let me make sure who this is. Say, Earl, he said, let's call up some square bitches and have them come over and dig this penthouse of yours, man. Earl, tall and brown-skinned, ran his fingers across his mustache, smiled, and walked to the glass-topped coffee table where Charles was busy twisting reefers. He picked up a joint and pointed it towards Billy before lighting up. That's the reason why I got this penthouse, Billy, instead of some run-down, cold-water flat across town, he said. What the hell you mean by that? Duke, the fourth member of the group, asked as he came over and joined the men at the table. He accepted one of the joints Charles held out to him. Earl took a slow drag from his reefer before answering. I'd feel like a damn fool if we had some square bitches sitting around getting high and one of my whores should happen to come home, he said. Billy picked up a cushion and tossed it over beside the table so he could kneel on it. What difference would it make? You're supposed to be the one doing the pimping, Earl, not one of your whores. Duke laughed loudly. I ain't got nothing to do with it, Earl, but Billy is pulling your coat to the rail. Pimpin' is my livelihood, nigga, so I don't need any goddamn instructions, Earl replied sarcastically. Neither you nor Billy would give me a goddamn penny towards my rent or car note if I blew my horse, so don't worry about how I take care of my business. Goddamn, baby, Billy replied jokingly. If someone who didn't know us heard you talking, they wouldn't believe we was real cool with each other. That's right, Duke yelled, putting his 2 cents in. He removed the large bankroll and began counting $100 bills on the table. I'll gladly loan you any parts of this case if you need it, man. Go ahead, take what you want. Charles twisted up the last reefer. Why don't you motherfuckers quit bullshitting? If it wasn't for them bitches Earl got out on the track, he couldn't borrow $5, let alone some big stuff. That ain't nothing but net. And the side of it at that. That ain't nothing but net. And the side of it at that you're talking out of. Earl spoke up with a youthful gaiety and irresponsibility of a young man who didn't care what others thought of him. Ain't nobody asked your greasy black ass to loan me no money, so you can quit flashing that little roll of yours. You sure in the hell ain't impressing nobody with that ADC trap money. Duke stuffed his bankroll back into his pocket. Okay, nigga, I hear you rapping. Just 'cause you got this pad up here, you must think that makes you one hell of a pimp. Earl laughed harshly. They rent these penthouses to anybody, Duke. All you got to do is be handling. All of the men laughed while Duke sneered, revealing a perfect set of evenly spaced, well-kept teeth. There was a constant undercurrent of competitive. Sorry. There was a constant undercurrent of competitiveness between the men in the apartment. None really trusted the other, not where their women were concerned. It was great sport for one to end up by taking one of his friend's girls. Duke continued his harassment. I still don't know how you went about getting this place, Earl. You sure don't look like no Peckerwood. What did you do? Send one of your white girls up to rent it? Again, the men in the room laughed. Earl adjusted his pants and straightened his shirt. Whatever I did, Duke, you could bet I did it like a player. In fact, if you should want a place here and can't get it because of your extremely dark man tan, you can let your white girl rent it, and you put on a white jacket and carry her bags and fur. That ain't nothing but bullshit you keep kicking back and forth, Billy said suddenly. I don't understand it, but every time you two get together, it always ends up with both of you trying to drop lugs on each other. Charles nodded in agreement. That's right. Instead of pimps, you act like two bitches. Earl and Duke glared at the other two men. Neither man actually wanted to discontinue the light exchange. Both men had a hidden dislike for one another, and yet they ran together almost every day. Let's ride down on the whores and see who's catching them the biggest, Duke said suddenly as he stood up. A dry, bitter laugh escaped from Earl. Since you ain't got no whores down the track, how in the hell are you going to find out who's catching what and how? Earl grinned at the other men, then added, Unless what you really mean is, let's ride down and see what them thoroughbred bitches I got are doing. Not really, Earl. You know, you ain't the only person in this room who happens to have a soul sister working down on the track. Bravo! Bravo! Billy shouted, clapping loudly. Earl watched Billy with the attitude of a man well aware of the deceitful nature of the people he deals with. Charles bent over. Wait. Yeah. Charles bent over and knocked the ashes off of his joint. Well, all the reefer's gone now, so let's do something. Here, Billy said, tossing a small package on the table. Let's snort this little bit of poison up before we pull. Earl stared at the package as though someone tossed a snake on his table. Well, I'll be damned, Billy. You mean to tell me you've been carrying all that smack around in my car all day without me even knowing about it? You didn't have nothing to worry about, Earl. And besides, it ain't nothing but a $50 bag. It ain't nothing but a $50 bag, Billy answered. Duke bent over the table and tore off a piece of matchbox cover. He quickly creased the torn piece down the middle and stuck one end of the quill into the white powder. With an adept motion, he picked up some of the white powder with his quill and quickly stuck it into his nose. Snorting loudly, he looked around the small group. "What's the matter, baby?" he said directly to Earl. "Is a little bit of money really making you get shitty?" Earl spoke up sharply. "You can call it anything you want to, Duke. But I don't want you or Billy or any goddamn body in my house, car, or just in my company carrying no dope without me knowing about it." Charles tried to relieve the sting of Earl's words. "That's about the way Dickie boy will feel about drugs by the time he gets out of prison," he said quietly. "That's about the way Dickie boy will feel about the drugs by the time he gets out of prison," he said quietly. His words put Billy on the defensive immediately. Everyone in the house knew just what he was saying. "What you talking ain't shit, Charles," Billy stated loudly. "That dope that was found in Dickie's car belonged to the white bitch, Pat. Belonged to the white bitch, Pat. If he hadn't had that funky bitch sitting damn near in his lap, the dope wouldn't have been found at his feet." There was a slight tightening of nerves, and the tension in the room could be felt. "Well, all of you were in the car together, my man," Earl said sharply, staring at Billy's flushed face. Before Billy could reply, Earl continued, "And I know for a fact that Dickie didn't fuck with no junk, so it sure didn't belong to him, and he's the one that got 5 years for it." "That's bullshit and you know it," Billy exploded. "They gave Dickie all that time because they knew he was driving a Cadillac that his white horse had bought for him. They've been waiting. They've been wanting and waiting for the man for years, and they got the chance and just socked it to him." Earl stared around the room at the other men. He was young, strong, and full of confidence. "Well, that may be the case," he said. "But for the record, I want you to know that I don't want any drugs in my car unless you done pulled my coat to it." "Aw, man, why you come up with that weak shit?" Billy asked, then added, "You act like I ain't got a Cadillac of my own, baby. I ain't just got to ride in yours." "Well, you said it, Billy. I didn't. But since you stated it, I think that's the best thing I've heard. I know you ain't gonna do right, and any time you get in somebody's car, you're gonna be carrying some kind of drugs for either you or your woman. So, take your own weight." "That's cool," Billy answered while in the process of snorting up some dope. "I guess you remember I left my car across town when I got in your car with you and Charles." "You don't have to worry, Billy Banks," Earl replied. "I'm going to drop you and Duke back off at your car when we leave. I just want you to let me know when you get into my car if you're carrying dope on you. I like to be careful. I hate to have the police find a package of stuff on my floor when I don't really know how it got there." The men stared at each other. Billy was far from being a fool, but he didn't really get angry over what Earl had said. But he didn't really get angry over what Earl had said. If push came to shove, and he was in Earl's car and they got stopped, he knew in his heart that he'd stick the dope down in one of the cushions if he hadn't had the time to throw it out the window. Anything, just as long as he got rid of the dope so that the police couldn't take it out of his pocket. With the dope found in the car, he never have to worry about going to prison, not on a rap like that. Maybe Earl would end up losing his Cadillac, but that would be far better than getting a few years behind bars. The phone rang, and since Charles was sitting right next to it, he got Earl's nod, then picked up the receiver. 1 second, folks. Yo. It's long distance, sir. It's long distance, sir. It's long distance, sir, he said. It's long distance. It's long distance, Earl, he said, holding the phone out as Earl reached for it. Hi, honey, Earl said, then hesitated and began to listen. He picked the phone up and started to walk away with it, but changed his mind. What's the name of the doctor you seen? He asked suddenly. He waited and continued. Well, if the doctor thinks you should go to the hospital, honey, then you do what he says. Female trouble can become a problem if you don't take care of it. How much money have you got? 400. Well, that should be enough. Get you a private room, and if the bill should run over that, let me know. But what you try and do is tell them you'll pay the rest if it should turn out to be more than $400. As soon as you get back to work, you should be able to take care of that yourself, Lily. He nodded his head at something she said, then hung up. The bitch come down with female trouble, he said to no one in particular. Earl turned his back and walked over to the window and stared out. His mind was busy with how to handle the problem that had just come up. While his girl was in the hospital, he would miss the money that came regularly from the whorehouse in Pennsylvania. But the money wasn't his real problem. What he was pondering was whether or not he should send another girl up to fill the place of the one going to the hospital. If he did that, then when the one in the hospital got out, there would be confusion between the women. Lily was a good prostitute, but she couldn't get along with any of his other girls. That was one reason why he kept her working out of town. Whenever she came back to Detroit, she managed to always get into some kind of scrap with one of his other girls. Damn, baby, Duke said loudly. You sure believe in blowing your money, don't you? Earl turned from the window and stared at him. I don't know what you mean, man. Duke smiled, revealing yellow spots on his teeth. I mean, by blowing all that money on a hospital bill, all you had to do was have her check in a general hospital somewhere. And when she got well, just leave. Ain't no way they can make a whore pay no bill. He grinned widely at his own cleverness. Yeah, baby, if she was mine, I'd have had her mail that 400 by letting her keep 50 or something like that. But she never had blown all that money for no doctor bill. Yeah, I see what you mean, Earl replied, then laughed harshly. That's the difference in pimping and simping, man. I let all my ladies go first class all the time. That's why I got a stable of good young whores instead of some dope fiend bitches that shoot up all the profit. You can call it simping if you want to, Duke continued, determined to get his point across. But I'd be $400 richer sometime today if I had been in your place. Fuck all that shit, Billy said loudly as he snorted up the rest of his dope. I'd have asked you to take a blow, Charles, but I know you don't want your big chief Earl to know that you like a toot now and then. He glanced up at Earl. Hey man, how about running us back over on Johnny R Street so I can pick up my car? Earl picked up the vest that went with his mod walking suit. He walked into the bedroom to see if the brown silk outfit was fitting him properly. When he came out, he was ready to go. Oh no. The fuck was this? One second, yo. Oh man. Oh, I know what I did. Motherfucker. Shit. My bad, y'all. I fucked around and stopped the shit. God damn it. Hi, honey, Earl said, then hesitated and began to listen. He picked up the phone and started to walk away with it, but changed his mind. What's the name of the doctor you're seeing? He asked suddenly. He waited, then continued. Well, if the doctor thinks you should go into the hospital, honey, then you do what he says. Female trouble could become a problem if you don't take care of it. How much money have you got? 400. Well, that should be enough. Get you a private room, and if the bill should run over that, let me know. But what you try and do is tell them you'll pay the rest. If it turned out to be more than 400, if it should turn out to be more than $400. As soon as you get back to work, you should be able to take care of that yourself, Lil. He nodded his head at something she said, then hung up. The bitch done come down with female trouble, he said to no one in particular. Earl turned his back and walked over to the window and stared out. His mind was busy with how to handle the problem that had just come up. While his girl was in the hospital, he would miss the money that came regularly from the whorehouse in Pennsylvania. But the money wasn't his real problem. What he was pondering was whether or not he should send another girl up to fill the place of the one going to the hospital. If he did that, then when the one in the hospital got out, there would be confusion between the women. Lil was a good prostitute, but she couldn't get along with any of his other girls. That was one reason why he kept her working out of town. Whenever she came back to Detroit, she managed to always get into some kind of scrap with one of his other girls. Damn, baby, Duke said loudly. You sure believe in blowing your money, don't you? Earl turned from the window and stared at him. I don't know what you mean, man. Duke smiled, revealing yellow spots on his teeth. I mean, by blowing all that money on a hospital bill, all you had to do was have her check in a general hospital somewhere. And when she got well, just leave. Ain't no way they can make a whore pay no bill. He grinned widely at his own cleverness. Yeah, baby, if she was mine, I'd have had her mail that 400, maybe letting her keep 50 or something like that. But she never had blown all that money for no doctor bill. Yeah, I see what you mean, Earl replied, then laughed harshly. That's the difference in pimpin' and simpin', man. I let all my ladies go, first class, all the time. That's why I got a stable of good young whores instead of some dope fiend bitches that shoot up all the profit. You can call it simping if you want to, Duke continued, determined to get his point across. But I'll be $400 richer sometime today if I had been in your place. Fuck all that shit, Billy said loudly as he snorted up the rest of his dope. I'd have asked you to take the blow, Charles, but I know you don't want your big Chief Earl to know that you like a toot now and then. He glanced up at Earl. Hey, man, how about you running us back over to Johnny R Street so I can pick up my car? Earl picked up the vest that went with his mod walking suit. He walked into the bedroom to see if the brown silk outfit was fitting him properly. When he came out, he was ready to go. The rest of the men got up and followed him to the door. Billy laughed loudly as they walked out into the hallway. After closing the door and shaking it to make sure it was locked, Earl caught up with the group at the elevator. He spoke directly to Duke. Everybody seems to have a lot of advice about how somebody else should treat their whores. But when it comes down to the real, all a nigga will find out is that all his so-called friends have but one thought in mind, and that's how to steal one of them whores from his stiff ass if he lets his game get funny. The elevator door opened in front of them. Earl stepped in before Duke could reply. There was an elderly, well-dressed couple already inside, so they discontinued the conversation. Okay. Pardon me, folks. There's times I have to repeat myself, whether it's elements I hear outside or slip of the tongue, because it ain't fun, But, yeah, man, I'm going to do this a lot. This is, however, Ralph Reads Raw, where here on this program, I read, just to get it ready. Now, thank y'all for tuning in. Let's begin Chapter 2. Chapter 2. After dropping Duke and Billy off, Earl, known in and out of all the craps houses and after-hours joints in the city as Earl the Black Pearl, decided to drive up on 12th and see what kind of action he could find on the corner so early in the evening. He didn't bother to ask the quiet man riding next to him if he wanted to go. Slumped down in the front seat, Charles stared out of the wide Cadillac window. You know what we should do for this coming holiday? He asked suddenly. You know what we should do for this coming holiday? He asked suddenly, his voice a deep bass and seeming to rumble as he spoke. I don't know. What should we do? I don't know what we should do, Earl replied easily. But I guess I got a damn good idea of what I'm gonna be doing. The news came on the radio and Earl quickly switched on the tape recorder. Charles stared at the slim, dark-skinned man behind the steering wheel. Some black men seemed out of place behind the wheel of the expensive automobiles they drove, wearing work clothes, factory outfits, and a $10,000 car. But Earl appeared as if the car had been made for him. The white on the white Cadillac fitted him to perfection. The diamonds that he wore glittered as his hand moved over and flicked the button to let the electric window a crack. He lit up a stick of reefer. That don't mean that I won't listen to a good idea for the coming holiday, though. Run it down, baby. I just might go for it. Nah, man, that's okay. It wouldn't have made no sense anyway. It wouldn't have made no sense no way. Charles shrugged his shoulders and straightened up in the seat. We just passed a man coming out of the alley. We just passed a man coming out of that alley. Earl nodded and continued to smoke the weed. Every now and then, he would check out the mirror. He started to speak, then caught himself. He didn't think he could get Charles to understand just what he meant, and he might just give the wrong impression. It was just that he got a nervous feeling whenever he passed policemen. It wasn't a fear. It was more like a danger signal. In them, he saw the constant threat to his way of life. As he drove along, the neighborhood began its subtle change. He turned right on 12th, a one-way street, and pawn shops and nightclubs began to spring up on each side of the street. Farther on, one could see the devastation of the 60s burning and looting spree. It was everywhere. Here, a gutted building; next door, a large lot with the debris of past fires scattered over its barren surface. They stopped for a red light, and the early evening breeze drifted lightly around the car. Everywhere they looked, there were the clusters of people that the good weather brought out. They pushed against each other in the cluttered entrances of open doorways to apartment houses and pool rooms and shine parlors. Girls with shortened skirts stood in the darkened doorways while their counterparts patrolled the sidewalks in revealing hot pants outfits. Charles stared hungrily at one of the younger prostitutes. I bet money, Charles, that you turn a trick with that young girl. If you wasn't shamed, she'd come back up on the corner to tell it. I bet money, Charles, that you turn a trick with that young girl. If you wasn't shamed, she'd come back up on the corner and tell it, Earl said, tossing back his head and laughing. It was a deep sound, one full of mirth, with the kind of heaviness coming through that aroused women. It was also a practice laugh, one that could be turned on and off at will. Charles joined in the laughter. He knew it was true. He'd never make a successful pimp of himself. He loved to groove too much. He fell in love with his woman's hips, and that lovejoy was his downfall. Earl called it, quote-unquote, having a tender dick. That's right, boy. You need to laugh, Earl said. If there's any man who's guilty of following his dick, it's you. For a hard-on, Charles, you'll fuck around to drive 500 goddamn miles. Get there, get the cock, and never bother to ask about the trap money. He laughed again and stared at his husky partner. Charles was by nature a thug. He took his by wit or pistol. Sounds. Go away. Charles was by nature a thug. He took his by wit or pistol. Ever since they were childhood friends, Charles was a strong-arm man. At that step in their development, Charles was the boy most of them looked up to. He was the fighter, going to the gym at night and taking up boxing. How the worm turns, Earl thought coldly. He had been one of the cool ones during this period, always standing back against the wall, posing, and at all times as sharp as his wardrobe would allow him to be. Another red light caught them. As they sat at the light, two brown-skinned girls crossed the street, flirting openly with the men in the Cadillac. "Boy, oh boy," Charles exclaimed. "You sure get a lot of action. You sure get a lot of action when you ride in the hog." Earl's laughter rang out sharp and clear. "It don't have to be the caddy, baby. It just might have been me they were giving that action to, man." "Shit," Charles said loudly. "It was the caddy, baby. That's what it was. Them bitches was looking at the ride. It wouldn't have made any difference if two apes were sitting in here." "Okay, baby, okay," Earl replied easily. "I ain't about to start arguing over it with you. But one day, you'll find out. It ain't always the car, but sometimes it helps out." He laughed again, this time softer. Another red light caught them. As they sat waiting for it to change, a long gold Eldorado turned the corner. The driver recognized Earl and blew the Eldorado's deep horn. Earl waved at the driver. "Old Bobby Spencer," he said, speaking more to himself than to Charles. "That old man has handled more money than any 4 niggas in this city," he stated. "I guess so," Charles answered. If I had the good coke connect that he's got, I'd handle the same kind of money myself." "Maybe. That man has been selling coke. That man has been selling cocaine for over 20 years now, Charles, and he ain't got busted yet. Now that's what I call a smart street nigga." "It ain't that he's all that smart, Earl, or that he can't get busted. He's just been lucky that them bitches that he's got dealing for him ain't never switched around on him and cracked him downtown. Shit, every time one of his broads get busted, they take the weight themselves. Ain't none of them ever give him no trouble." Charles fell silent, waiting for Earl to agree with him. "That ain't luck, Charles. That's business. That's business. It shows the man knows what's happening. He must tell his women just how to handle it. 'Cause if you don't explain it to a bitch and leave it to her to handle, she'll fuck it up every time." "I don't know," Charles mumbled. "It seemed like luck to me. If it was me, the bitch would get downtown and tell it all." "I'll agree with that," Earl said. "More than likely, you had left it up to the women to handle it. More than likely, you'd have left it up to the woman to handle it, never taking the time to sit her down and explain just what to tell them white folks downtown whenever the bus came. So when the bitch got busted, she'd be feeling on her own, and she tried shifting the weight. It's all in being a top-notch player or just another mediocre-ass nigga out here in the streets." After the exchange, they rode on in silence, neither man bothering to break the stillness. Each man sank down in his own thoughts, Charles thinking that he was right, that it was just a matter of luck, and Earl knowing that he was right, that it was just a matter of taking care of business. He saw a parking spot in front of a small barbecue restaurant, pulled over, and let his white convertible top down, As the top went back slowly, 4 young girls standing in the front of the Greasy Spoon restaurant stared at the occupants of the car brazenly. In their glance, there was an invitation that needed no words to explain. The weather was warm, the evening was young, and a ride in the convertible would beat the hell out of standing in front of a dirty restaurant. The girls were more than eager. They were ready. Without seeming to, Earl steadily examined the women. Suddenly, there was a quick movement to his eyes as they focused on one of the girls in particular. He murmured. What a lovely creature that is. Before he had the time to make a move of his own, Charles took the play out of his hands. Come here, baby, he yelled, not picking out any particular girl. Two of the young girls moved away from the window and walked over to the car. The beauty that Earl had noticed was one of them. When the girls reached the car, Charles began to fidget. Now that the action was right in front of him, he was at a loss for words. Earl watched his friend, amused, and his lips turned down in a cold sneer that he was unconscious of. The girls were amused by Charles's seeming inability to follow up on his bold approach. He began. Ain't you got a sister girl that works out of the Honey Bunch bar? He asked, trying to break the cold silence. The tall, brown-skinned girl, whom he had addressed the question to, put her hand on her hip. No, baby, I'm afraid you got me mixed up with somebody else, she answered frankly, her eyes shifting over to Earl. It was obvious that she wasn't interested in Charles. The slight rejection stung Charles, and he became nasty. Bitch, I ain't got you mixed up with nobody. Your sister is whoring out of the motherfucking bar, so you ain't got to lie about it. Now she gave Charles her full attention. She stared straight into his eyes and answered, If I do have a sister working out of there at night, I don't see why you should be concerned with it. 'Cause she sure ain't got no stiff-ass nigga like you for her man. She rocked back on her heels, spreading her legs so that the tight, tiny skirt seemed about to burst. Earl caught his breath. My God, he thought, and shook his head. She's lovely. With the sun shining down on her, she seemed to be a dark bronze, a golden rust color. Her skin had the same deep color of a shiny penny, deep with a darkish tan. He stared at her face. Her eyes, a midnight black, were flashing now that she was angry. Her small, well-developed nose seemed to swell as small beads of perspiration rolled from her brow. If there was any defect in her beauty, it was a small gap between her front teeth. Deciding to break it up before it got out of hand, Earl laughed softly. That's what you get for yelling at them young girls, Charles. They haven't had a man sit them down and teach them how to really respect a man, so they must say anything. Earl's main concern had been to pacify Charles because he knew the large man had an uncontrollable temper at times, which could be very dangerous for anyone who opposed him, male or female. His words aroused the girl's anger. She leaned over and pointed her finger at Earl. Ain't that about a bitch? She snarled. I'm supposed to have been disrespectful. I'm supposed to have been disrespectful. She laughed harshly. Ain't that about a pound of pure shit? Here your friend calls me a bitch from out of a clear blue sky, and I'm disrespectful. She dragged the words out, still pointing her finger. When he called me over to the car, I thought I was being called over to the car by a couple of players. But I see now what's happening is just like they say. You can take a nigga out of the country, but you can't get the country out of a nigga. Her girlfriend nudged her, then tried to take her arm and pull her away. She shook the girl's arm off. These niggas screamed on me first, honey. I ain't say nothing to them. She tossed her head angrily, making the natural long black hair whip about her shoulders. Charles shook his head stupidly. The directness of the girl's attack left him completely dumbfounded. To make up for his first error, he now blundered straight ahead without thinking. Bitch, if you don't know how to respect a man yet, a couple of well-placed punches upside your head will make you tighten your game so that you'll respect one in the future. The young girl stared at Charles as if he had lost his mind. Her girlfriend gave her arm one more pull, then split back to the safety of her other girlfriends. The sharp, unwavering stare made Charles more angry than he had ever been. He fumbled to open the car door. Earl was caught completely off guard by the quick turn of events. Before Charles was out of the car, the girl had read his intentions. She ran around the car as Charles jumped from the front seat, and she stopped beside Earl's open window. Listen, mister, my name is Vicki, and I didn't walk up to your car to get jumped on. Can't you do something with this crazy friend of yours? Before Earl could answer, Charles ran up and caught the girl by both arms. He shook her so violently, her head jerked dangerously on her shoulders. Earl moved swiftly. The girl was in real danger, and he knew from experience that Charles was very unpredictable. Pushing the steering wheel up and out of the way, he slid out of the car. He caught Charles' furious stare. He nodded towards the car seat. I got just what she needs, baby boy. His words seemed to take effect on the large man. What you need is a man, bitch, Charles snarled, then pushed her into the open car. As she tried to catch her balance, Charles slapped her viciously across the mouth. Maybe Earl will take the time and teach you how to respect a man, he said as he sprawled out on the front seat. Earl slid smoothly between the fighting couple, pushing the girl's legs out of the way as he got under the steering wheel. He grinned up at Charles. Thanks, baby boy. You never really know about these things, but ain't no sense us going to jail tonight, is there, man? Before Charles could mutter a reply, a large motor in the car came alive. It roared deeply, sounding powerful. You know, you could get busted jumping on young girls, Earl said. His loud laughter rang out, and he pulled away from the curb, leaving Charles standing in the middle of the street, staring around stupidly. It had been crude, he thought coldly to himself as he stared into his rearview mirror at Charles. Charles was a pain in the ass. Earl reflected for the thousandth time. Without glancing in the girl's direction, Earl leaned over and punched a tape recorder. In moments, the interior of the car was flooded with music. "My name is Vicki." The short statement didn't seem to carry any hostility. Rather, the voice seemed more like a caress, intimate, deeply private. This time, Earl did glance around. He stared at her openly and was shaken. For the first time in his pimping life, a woman with nothing but a voice and appearance had made a strong impression on him. After taking a sharp curve, Earl reached over and removed a box of tissue from his glove compartment. "Here, honey, your eyes got kind of wet back there. Maybe you could use some of these." She removed a few from the box, then pulled the sun visor down and began repairing her makeup. "Your friend must be some kind of nut. Does he get his kicks from beating up people?" "He did seem to get upset back there over nothing, honey. But what he told you was true. You brought most of that down on yourself by your flip answers." Earl hesitated slightly, then continued. "I've known Charles for quite a while, and you could take my word for it. He ain't freakish. He ain't freakish to beating up folks, even though he does a damn good job of it if he ever gets started. With a sudden toss of her head, Vicki laughed. Well, I can chalk it up as a cheap lesson. Plus, from now on, whenever, wherever, or however I come in near contact with your friend, I'll personally give him as much room as I would any dangerous animal I happen upon if I lived in a jungle." She removed her eyebrow pencil and redid her shaved eyebrows. From what Earl had noticed, she was tall and well-shaped for her age. She had the exceptional body of a young girl who hadn't had any babies yet, while her complexion had a golden hue about it, a compelling light brown, not as light as an average Spanish person, yet not as dark as many Latin people. As she crossed her long, beautiful legs, Earl followed the motion with his eyes. "I'd like to ask you a few very personal questions, Vicki, but from the bell, I want you to know that I don't want any lies. Rather, if you will, try and explain whatever it is to me and the reason why you'd have lied to me about it, you understand?" Slightly angered, she twisted in the seat, causing the tight black skirt she wore to rise up on her lovely thighs. "Well, I didn't know accepting a lift from you would cause me to have to submit a resume to you that I don't think it's any of your business." "Damn it," he cursed softly as a red light caught him in the middle of the street. He pushed the gas pedal down and ran the light. Both of them glanced back, looking for the ever-present police car at times like that. "I'm sorry, Vicki. I really haven't explained myself to you, so I can't understand your misunderstanding my approach." Before she could say anything, he continued. "I really don't want to know a hell of a lot about you, but there is one thing I do want to know, and I want to know the truth. How old are you?" Now it was her turn to hesitate. "I'm not ashamed because I'm young, nor do I have any reason to lie about it." Vicki turned and stared up at him, and the lie that she was about to state died on the tip of her tongue. "I'm only 17. My next birthday is next year, too." Now why in the hell did I go and do that? She scolded herself harshly. I could have told him 18 and he never known the difference. "I had put you on being 17, girl. Is there somewhere I could drop you off?" Vicki was startled. If you thought I was 17, Earl, that's too young, why did you go through the bother of pulling away from the curb with such a baby in your car? She stared at him with all the brashness of youth. Earl returned her stare. She was pretty, all right, but she represented a problem. The way he lived demanded that the woman pay her own way. He couldn't afford to support her. I'll be honest with you, girl. I was hoping that you was 18 or would be turning that age soon. Without anger, she began to speak. Her voice was low and husky. I don't go to school, Earl. I quit when I was 16 and started working downtown in the restaurant with my mother. She had his attention now, mainly because she seemed sincere. She seemed to be much more mature than her age warranted. He thought about her until she broke the silence. I moved away from home last week when my mother brought my new stepfather home. He can't keep his hands off me. He studied her closely, wondering how much of this he could really believe. He knew from experience that a young girl might tell him anything. Where are you staying at now? He asked, still not committing himself. I've been staying with different girlfriends every night. I checked my bags down at the Greyhound bus station. That way, I don't have no problem whenever I want to change clothes. The locker don't cost but $10 a day. Talking about a temporary arrangement. Talking about a temporary arrangement. You really got one, Vicki, he said quietly. It was already in the back of his mind to do whatever he could to add this young devil to his stable. There's no doubt about it, baby. You do need help. But the problem is really whether or not you will accept it. She knew just what he meant. She was far from being a naive young girl. Vicki was well aware of what pimps did for a living. She rode on in silence, watching the landscape as he sped through the city streets. Earl parked in front of his apartment building, and Vicki followed along silently as he got out and led the way through the lobby and into the elevator. It was a smooth, quick ride to the upper penthouse floor. The elevator deposited them in the hallway, and while Earl searched for his key, Vicki stared around in astonishment at the elegance. He opened the door and stepped back, allowing her to enter the suite before him. She stopped and stared around dumbfounded. It was the first time in her life she had ever seen anything like his penthouse apartment outside of a movie. The extra thick, dark red wall-to-wall carpet gave her the sensation of sinking every time she took a step. The furnishings were French provincial, rich, ornate, and colorful. The bedroom doors were modern French doors, with 2 adjoining doors hinged at the sides to open in the middle and long glass side panes that were stained so that they matched the rest of the expensive decor. Damn, baby, he said lightly. Every time I bring a black girl up here, she acts like she has stepped into another world. He grinned as she drew herself up. His remark irritated her, and she replied acidly, Oh, if that's the case, then I take it for granted that all of your girls must be lily white or real damn light. Earl smiled. Pull your horns in, baby. To be honest, I don't have any white girls. Not at the present anyway. All of my ladies are soul sisters, Vicki. The tension that had begun to build between them disappeared, and Vicki relaxed once again. I'm glad to hear that, she said. I'd rather have a dozen wife-in-laws if they're black than one Ofe. I'd rather have a dozen wife-in-laws if they're black than one Ofe. Earl studied her closely before replying. He had just about chosen her, but he wanted to be sure. Being a whore, Vicki, is more than just a notion. It's not like what you see in the movies, where a girl spends all day and half the night with a John, then puts on airs about receiving the cash. Out there in the streets, you get your money real quick. Real quick, girl. You get your money quick. Real quick, girl. He snapped his fingers to illustrate. Vicki laughed, a deep, husky sound. It was full of life and joy. You jump to conclusions fast, don't you, Earl? I haven't even said anything about wanting to be a whore, but yet you've taken it for granted. The sound of her laughter was rich and carried a note of excitement in it. Earl walked over to the bar and mixed himself a drink. He stared at her for a long time before answering. It's possible I could have made a mistake, Vicki, but I doubt it. I don't think you have been wasting my time or yours either. He smiled slightly. Now, if you want to play coy or something like that, he shrugged his well-shaped shoulders and the muscles rippled under his silk shirt. Don't tell me I've really wasted my time bringing you up here, he said, half amused. The lights flickered on her raven black hair, and he idly wondered how she would look in a loud blonde wig. She really didn't need one, he reflected, answering his own question. Vicki reached across the bar and laid her hand on top of his. She stared into his deep black eyes. Damn, baby, she said softly. You don't believe in giving a woman very much time to make up her mind, do you? His laughter rang out loudly. He waved his hand around, indicating their surroundings. You have to work your way up to something like this, Vicki. A girl in a $50 a week job couldn't begin to expect to live in such a place. If other women can afford to live in such a place, Vicki replied, putting her hands on her hips, I don't see why I can't make the grade. It's possible, he answered. But every bitch don't live in no penthouse just because she sells a little ass. Only the very best whores are qualified to live in this kind of joint. Some whores catching all their lives and still can't get out of a cold water flat. He waited, watching her reaction before adding, It's not just the looks that count, honey. A girl can be beautiful, just like you are, and built up like a famous brick shithouse. But if she happens to be lazy or really scared, she won't ever make any money that will amount to anything. Vicki lit a cigarette, slowly inhaled, then blew the smoke out over her head. How can you tell a good girl? How can you tell a real good hustler from one that's just fair? That ain't no problem. A thoroughbred always stands out, honey. That would-be thoroughbred will fade in the stretch, but the pedigreed mud kicker, she'll come up catching them big every time. In other words, Earl, you could just about look at a woman and you can tell if she's going to be a winner or not. In other words, Earl, you can just about look at any woman and you can tell if she's going to be a winner or not. No, baby, I didn't say that. I don't know how I gave you that impression. When it comes to a good thoroughbred whore, the only way you judge is by the money. An average bitch will go out in the streets and work hard as hell till she gets $50. Then she'll end up bullshitting the rest of the night because she'll think she done made enough for a night's trap. You ain't bullshitting me, are you, Earl? Vicki asked, surprised. $50 and $60, $50 or $60 sounds like a lot of money to me for just one night's work. Especially if you make that much every night. Every night. She stared at him curiously, wondering if he was just playing the big shot with her. She knew she was young, and there were a lot of things she didn't know. But $50 added up to quite a bit of money in the run of a week if you made that much every night. Shit, she thought, in the run of a week, you have made close to $500. And to her way of thinking, $500 was a whole lot of cash. Without any form or humor, Earl stated dryly, "It ain't shit, woman. That's why I say only the very best of hustling girls get a chance to live like this." Again, he waved his hand around, taking in the apartment. $50 a day wouldn't even pay the rent on this place, Vicki. You have to think big, honey, if you want to do big things. Vicki sat down on the bar stool and stared at Earl coldly. "I don't care what it takes, Daddy, but if another black bitch can do it, I'm ready and willing to start learning. And," she added, "I mean to be one of the very best." "Good," Earl said. He walked from behind the bar and opened the bedroom door. Since you feel like that, you might as well start learning now." Her eyes followed him, and he entered the bedroom. "I knew it," she told herself silently as she got up and followed him into the bedroom. "I thought pimps were different," she thought coldly, "but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they have the same thing on their fucking minds as the rest of the men. That's all of them. That's all any of them really have on their minds. Just what it does, it take to get this bitch in bed. Well, I've made my choice, so I guess I'll have to follow it to the end," she reasoned, closing the bedroom door behind her. She removed her sweater and slowly undid the buttons on her blouse. She removed the garment and laid it neatly on a chair. With a swift motion, she raised her skirt and removed her garter belt. In a moment, she was completely nude, revealing all of her natural beauty. Earl stared at her coldly. She was a very attractive girl, and he knew that her youth would be an asset on the open market. He turned his back on her and removed the towel from the large mahogany dresser that covered most of the north wall. "Here," he said, tossing the towel to her. "Take a bath. It might cool you off," he smiled. "You'll find all the bath oils and whatever else you might need in the medicine cabinet. Vicki caught the towel and glared angrily. "I may have been poor, but I was able to take a bath every day, so I don't think I'm carrying any kind of odor." "I don't doubt that at all, Vicki. In fact, I wasn't thinking about you smelling or anything like that when I made the suggestion. I just happened to have some outfits I want you to try on, and I'm so used to taking a shower before I put on anything new. I thought that you probably had the same habit when it came to new clothes." You're right about that, she answered, breaking into a quick smile. I'm sorry if I sounded a little peeved. A bath will make me feel 100% better, too. A bath will make me feel 100% better, too. She quickly wrapped the towel around her and started towards the bath. Earl caught up with her at the door. He caressed one of her lovely golden brown breasts. Your tit is a Your tit is as hard as a rock. It won't take a trick long to figure out that he's getting something young and tender, Earl said, leaning down and running his tongue gently over one of her nipples until it became rigid. She tossed her head back, and a smothering light came into her eyes, and her breathing became harsh as he kissed her in the deep curve of her neck. Earl pushed her back and held her at arm's length. Damn, he exclaimed. I'd better let you go on and take care of your business, or won't nothing get done. Or won't nothing get done. He twisted her around and spanked her on the ass playfully as he shoved her towards the bath. Oh, by the way, baby, he said, what size dress do you wear? All right, I'm going to wrap it up right here. Street Players. That was chapters 1 and 2. I'm going to continue 3 and 4 in a couple of days. It won't be too long, I promise. I used to really go crazy and let y'all wait. But, I've adopted this new thing where I'm going to come every other day or so and read you as fast as I can, you know what I mean? While I continue to stylize all the other recordings I had. So, pretty soon, look out for Love After Midnight, which I'll be stylizing soon. And I'm also coming out with a new omnibus. That's going to be Whoreson. Stand by for that. It's going to take about a good couple of weeks for me to get done. I mean, the original versions are available, but I got to remaster them on this new upcoming omnibus. So if you want to listen to the original version, it's there. It's available for you. Either that or you can wait on the new stylized remastered version. Also, I have a podcast out there on Spotify that I would love for you to check out. It's called Bounce with an exclamation point. Check that out, all right? Please give me 5 stars. Any little bit helps. And thank you for being so kind to check out this program. Let me see who's in the house. Well, I gotta give a big shout out to those folks that came out and took the time to check this little joint out here that I got. Donald Goines' Street Players. Thank you for coming on Ralph Reed's Raw. I am fully appreciative that y'all took the time to hang out with me. So, won't be too long, I promise, folks. So, with that being said, stay sexy. It becomes you.